Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The New York Mets just made a move that's flying completely under the radar. And if you're not paying attention to how they're building their organization from the ground up, you're missing the bigger picture of what David Stearns is actually trying to accomplish here. While everyone's focused on the lack of splashy free agent signings and complaining about what the Mets haven't done this offseason, they quietly acquired a prospect in the Jeff McNeil trade who could end up being a significant piece of their future. Let me break down why this matters and what it tells us about how this front office is thinking long term. The Mets traded Jeff McNeil to the Oakland Athletics, and while most of the attention focused on shedding salary and moving on from a player whose production has declined significantly, the real story is who they got back. Yordon Rodriguez is a 17-year-old pitcher from Cuba who signed with the Athletics back in January for a $400,000 bonus. He spent his first professional season in the Dominican Summer League, and while the sample size is small, the results were genuinely promising. In 15 and one-third innings, he allowed just 5 runs while striking out 20 batters. Yes, he walked 8, which shows control needs development, but 20 strikeouts in that limited time demonstrates real swing and miss stuff. Let's put this in context because understanding the McNeil side of the equation helps explain why the Mets were willing to make this move. Jeff McNeil was supposed to be a contact hitting machine, someone who consistently put the ball in play and maintained a high batting average. Over his time with the Mets, he was exactly that. He hit .284 with a .780 OPS across his career in New York. He made 2 All-Star games. He won the 2022 National League batting title and took home a Silver Slugger award. For several years, he was a genuinely valuable piece of the roster. But something changed. His 2024 season showed a player in clear decline. He hit just .243 with a .746 OPS. The contact skills that defined his value started disappearing. He wasn't hitting for power, which you could forgive if he was still getting on base consistently, but he wasn't doing that either. For a team trying to compete at the highest level, paying significant money to a declining player who no longer provides his signature skill doesn't make strategic sense. The Athletics, who are in a completely different phase of their competitive cycle, can afford to take a chance on McNeil potentially rebounding while playing every day. For them, he fills a middle infield spot and provides veteran presence on an extremely young roster. From the Mets' perspective, this trade accomplishes multiple things simultaneously. First, it clears salary that can be reallocated toward other needs, even though they're still paying a portion of McNeil's remaining contract. Second, it opens roster space for younger players who might provide more upside. Third, and this is what people are sleeping on, it adds a legitimate pitching prospect to an organization that's been phenomenal at developing arms recently. Rodriguez isn't going to help the major league team anytime soon. At 17 years old, he's years away from contributing at the highest level. But when you're building a sustainable organization, you can't only think about the next season. You need a constant pipeline of talent flowing through your system, and pitchers with legitimate strikeout ability are always valuable, even when they're extremely raw. The Mets have shown recently that they know how to develop pitching talent. Their prospect system is loaded with quality arms, and adding Rodriguez gives them another high-upside lottery ticket who could develop into something significant. Baseball Unstitched podcast pointed out that back in 2023, prospect evaluator Francis Romero ranked Rodriguez as his number 5 prospect among under 15 players in Cuba. 2 years later, after a solid debut in rookie ball, he's landing in an organization with proven development infrastructure and a clear track record of maximizing young pitchers. That's not an accident. That's strategic roster building. Now let's talk about how this impacts the major league roster, because that's what most fans care about immediately. The Mets replaced McNeil's production by signing Jorge Polanco, who brings a completely different skill set. Polanco's batting average hasn't been as high as McNeil's in recent years, but he provides significantly more power. Last season he posted an .828 OPS compared to McNeil's .746. For a team that just lost Pete Alonso's power in the middle of the lineup, adding someone who can hit for extra bases matters enormously. Polanco also provides defensive versatility and the ability to hit from both sides of the plate, giving the Mets another switch hitter who can provide different looks depending on matchups. Most switch hitters perform better from the left side, and Polanco fits that pattern, but having the flexibility to put a right-handed bat in the box when needed creates tactical advantages that straight pull-side hitters can't provide. Looking at the current Mets lineup construction, there are still obvious holes that need addressing. Francisco Lindor anchors the top of the order and remains one of the elite shortstops in baseball. His .811 OPS last season with a 6.3 WAR shows exactly why the Mets invested heavily in him. Andres Giménez provides excellent defense, even if his offense has trended downward. Juan Soto is obviously a generational talent who looks like a future Hall of Famer. Polanco adds production at first base or second base, depending on where they need him. Mark Vientos showed significant improvement after the All-Star break last season and needs to prove that version of himself is sustainable. Brett Beatty posted a 3.1 WAR and finally started looking like the prospect everyone hoped he'd become. Francisco Alvarez still has significant developmental upside if he can continue improving at the plate. Then you get to the outfield, and this is where things get murky. Carson Benj will get his shot as a rookie, and the organization clearly believes in his potential. But Tyrone Taylor as an everyday player is problematic. He's a fourth outfielder at best, someone who provides defensive value in center field but doesn't hit enough to justify regular playing time. If the Mets are serious about competing, they need to add another outfield bat, whether that's through a trade for Kyle Tucker or a signing like Cody Bellinger. Even someone like Harrison Bader, who isn't going to carry your offense but plays excellent defense and brings playoff experience, would be an upgrade over expecting Taylor to be a starter. The broader point here is that David Stearns is building the organization on multiple timelines simultaneously. He's addressing immediate major league needs by upgrading positions where production declined. He's maintaining financial flexibility to make additional moves if opportunities arise. And he's consistently adding young talent to the pipeline who could develop into impact players down the line. Rodriguez represents that third category, the long-term investment that might not pay dividends for years but costs relatively little and carries significant upside if everything develops properly. Critics of Stearns will point to the lack of blockbuster moves this offseason, and I understand that frustration. Mets fans watched their team make a surprising playoff run last year and expected the front office to capitalize on that momentum by adding multiple impact pieces. Instead, the winter has been relatively quiet, with modest upgrades and financial maneuvering rather than the splashy signings that generate headlines. But here's the counter-argument. Sustainable success in baseball doesn't come from constantly swinging for the fences in free agency and mortgaging your future for immediate gains. It comes from building organizational depth, developing talent internally, and making strategic additions that improve your roster without creating long-term financial problems. The Dodgers, who everyone points to as the model organization, don't just spend money. They develop elite prospects, make smart trades for controlled talent, and supplement with free agent signings when it makes sense. The Mets under Stearns seem to be following a similar blueprint. The McNeil trade won't generate the excitement that landing a superstar would, but it represents exactly the kind of move that well-run organizations make constantly. You identify a declining asset on your roster who's being paid more than his current production justifies. You find a trade partner who values that player differently because they're in a different competitive window. You extract whatever value you can, whether that's salary relief, prospects, or both. Then you reallocate those resources more efficiently. Rodriguez is 17 years old with electric strikeout stuff and significant development needs. He's not going to be in the major leagues anytime soon. But in 3 or 4 years, when the Mets are evaluating their pitching depth and looking for cost-controlled arms who can contribute, he might be exactly the kind of player who provides surplus value. And if he doesn't pan out, the cost was minimal. That's how you build organizational depth without taking on significant risk. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think the Mets are building this correctly, focusing on organizational depth and sustainable success? Or should they be more aggressive in free agency and trades to capitalize on their current window? And specifically on Rodriguez, does adding a high upside pitching prospect in a salary dump trade represent smart asset management, or is it just window dressing on a disappointing offseason? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of move that looks different depending on whether you're evaluating it today or reassessing it 3 years from now. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to keep tracking every move the Mets make, from the blockbusters everyone notices to the under-the-radar acquisitions that might end up mattering just as much.